The silent knock in a quiet morning in Los Angeles. The sun slowly pushed its way through thick clouds that had draped the sky since dawn. The film set looked like every other set, filled with lights, wires, rushing crew members, and the usual air of tension that always comes before a big scene. People moved with purpose. Cameras were adjusted. Makeup artists hurried about, and in the center of it all stood Keanu Reeves, silent, still, his eyes watching a single trailer from a distance. Nobody noticed at first. But the truth was, he had been standing there for over 40 minutes. What made this day different wasn't the weather or the script. It was what had happened just an hour before call time. Ana de Armas, one of the lead actors in the film and Keanu's co-star, had arrived early. She was quiet, unusually so. She didn't respond much to greetings. When her assistant gently asked if she needed anything, she shook her head. And then, without a word, she walked into a trailer and locked the door from the inside. At first, no one thought much of it. Actors had their moods. Sometimes they needed silence, but time began to stretch. The director kept checking his watch. The crew stood around, unsure. Her scene was supposed to start at 9 a.m. It was 9:42 now. Keanu, who had already finished rehearsing his lines, approached her trailer. He didn't knock at first. He just stood there, quietly. A few crew members saw him and looked away, not wanting to intrude. There was something about the way he stood, like he wasn't just waiting, like he was listening. Finally he raised his hand and knocked gently. No response. He waited and knocked again. Still nothing. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said, "Ana, it's me. I'm here, if you want to talk. No pressure." Inside the trailer, Ana sat on the floor, her back pressed against the door. Her hands trembled slightly, and her breathing was shallow. There was no script in her lap, no mirror in front of her, no signs of preparation, just silence. Tears had dried on her cheeks, and her phone lay beside her, unanswered calls, unread messages. The world outside felt too loud, too heavy, but that soft voice outside, it cut through the noise just enough to make her listen. What no one on set knew was that Ana had received news that morning that shattered something inside her. Her father, who had been quietly fighting illness back home, had taken a turn for the worse. The hospital had called. There was talk of time being limited. It wasn't confirmed, but the tone said everything. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to break down. Not here, not now. But when she saw the camera crew setting up and the script calling for her to cry in the next scene, something inside her refused. She locked the door. She couldn't face the world pretending when her pain was real. Outside, Keanu sat down on the small steps leading up to the trailer. He didn't knock again. He didn't call anyone. He just waited. One of the assistant directors approached him. "Keanu, we're behind schedule. We might need to reshoot this later." He looked up. Then reschedule. She's more important. The assistant opened his mouth to say something but stopped. The words didn't seem to matter anymore. As the hours passed, whispers spread. People began to notice that Keanu hadn't moved, not to eat, not to take a break, not to answer calls. Every time someone passed, he simply nodded politely and went back to waiting. It wasn't grand, it wasn't dramatic. It was just consistent, quiet. Inside the trailer, Ana finally moved. She picked up her phone. She saw the calls, her mother, her brother. She almost called them back, but her hand stopped, and instead, she stood up slowly, walked to the tiny window near the ceiling of her trailer, and peeked through the blinds. She saw him still there, not frustrated, not impatient, not judging. Just waiting, and something about that image cracked. The wall she had built inside her. She sat back down and whispered to herself, "Why is he still there?" A memory came back to her. A moment on set weeks ago, during rehearsals. She had been nervous about a scene and had flubbed her lines. Instead of brushing it off, Keanu had taken a break with her. They had laughed, shared stories. He had told her about a time he forgot all his lines during a stage play. He didn't make her feel small. He made her feel seen. And now, even without knowing what had happened, he was here again. By sunset, the crew had started to pack things. They decided to push filming to the next day. Some people were frustrated, but nobody dared to say anything aloud anymore. The director walked by and saw Keanu still seated, still quiet. He looked at him and then at the trailer. "She's lucky," the director muttered. "Not everyone has someone who waits." Keanu didn't reply. That as night fell, the set emptied slowly. Lights were shut off one by one. The food truck rolled away, but the trailer stayed lit inside, and Keanu didn't leave. He leaned back against the steps, looking up at the stars. And then, finally, he heard something. A soft click. The trailer door opened just an inch. A voice came out, trembling but steady. "You're still here." He turned around, meeting her eyes. She looked tired. Her face was pale, but there was a softness in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I told you I would be," said gently. Ana stepped out slowly, still barefoot, her arms crossed over her chest. The cool air touched her skin, but she didn't seem to care. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. "You knew something was wrong," she whispered. He nodded. "I didn't know what, but I knew you weren't okay, and that was enough." A tear rolled down her cheek again, but this time she didn't wipe it away. She looked at him and said quietly, "I got some news. About my dad, I didn't know how to handle it. He stepped forward but didn't reach for her. He just stood close enough so she knew she wasn't alone. You don't have to handle it alone, he said. Anna broke down. Not loudly, not dramatically, but her shoulders fell and her voice cracked. I didn't want to break down in front of everyone. Then don't, he said softly. Just break down in front of me. And under the soft glow of the trailer light, as the night grew colder, Anna leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stood there in silence. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a fix, but it was something stronger. Presence. As the moon climbed higher, the world around them felt smaller. And inside that small space, two people stood still, one broken, one holding space, and the rest of the story had just begun. Cliffhanger. Ending to keep viewers watching. But just when Anna felt like she could breathe again, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated. Then she looked down. It was her mother. A message. 3 words. The airport silence. Seth's car ride to the airport was quiet, but not the kind of silence that felt cold. It was the kind of silence filled with emotion too big for words. Keanu drove, his eyes steady on the road, while Anna sat beside him, staring out the window. Her phone lay face down in her lap. She hadn't opened the message again. She didn't need to. Those 3 words, "come home now," had repeated in her mind like a heartbeat. She had read it once and felt something in her chest sink deep. She didn't ask questions. She didn't overthink, and she just walked back into the trailer, grabbed her bag, and when she turned around, Keanu was already waiting at the steps. "I'll take you," he said, not as a question, just a fact. And now, they were heading to Lax, not knowing what waited on the other side. Outside the car, the world moved fast. Traffic lights changed. Planes flew overhead. People walked the streets, with coffee cups and loud phone calls. But inside that car, it was still. Anna's mind drifted to memories she hadn't visited in years. Her father sitting on their front porch back in Havana, humming an old tune. The time he built her a makeshift camera tripod from wood and tape when she said she wanted to act. The way he used to say, "Even if no one believes in you, I do." She felt her throat tighten, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Keanu reached for the dashboard and turned the radio off. Anna hadn't realized it had been playing softly the entire time. She looked at him, and for the first time in the last hour, she spoke. "Thank you for coming with me." His grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly. "You don't have to thank me. Family is everything. I understand." Anna studied his face for a moment. It was calm, but behind his eyes, she saw something familiar. A weight, a memory, maybe even a wound. She didn't ask. Not now, but part of her wanted to know what he had lost, because he wasn't just being kind. There was something deeper in his choice to stay. At the airport, the two of them moved quickly, through security. Keanu had pulled a few strings to get a last-minute flight to Havana. He didn't leave her side once. Even at the gate, when Anna offered to go alone, he simply shook his head and said, "I've got time." On the plane, Anna finally let herself cry. Not the small tears from before, but a silent, constant stream that wouldn't stop. She turned her face toward the window and let the tears fall where no one could see. But Keanu noticed. He always noticed. Without a word, he pulled a small blanket from the seat pocket and gently placed it around her shoulders. She didn't speak. She just leaned slightly into him, and they sat like that for hours. 2 people flying through the night, connected by silence, sorrow, and something neither of them fully understood yet. When they landed, the air was thick and warm, heavy, with the scent of salt and distant rain. Anna's shoes hit the ground with hesitation. This was home, but it hadn't felt like home in years. The streets were the same. The air was the same. But something felt different. Maybe because now, every step brought her closer to news she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. A small car was waiting for them, arranged by Anna's cousin. The drive through Havana was slow. Colorful buildings passed by in a blur. People laughed in the distance. Someone was playing guitar on a corner. Life was still happening all around them, but Anna didn't see any of it. Keanu sat in the back seat, with her, his hand resting near hers but not touching. He had this way of offering presents without pressure. She noticed that. They pulled up to a small house with white walls and a faded blue door. The moment the car stopped, Anna didn't move. Her body froze. Her eyes stayed locked on the door, and her breathing grew shallow. Keanu leaned in, his voice low. "You don't have to go in right away. Take your time." Anna looked at him. "What if I'm too late?" "Then let your love speak louder than time." The door opened before she could answer. Her mother stepped out, her eyes red, her body tired. She saw Anna and didn't say a word. She just opened her arms, and Anna rushed forward, falling into them. Keanu stepped back, giving them space. He stood by the car, watching from a distance, his hands in his pockets, but he wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't pacing. He was just there, like a lighthouse in the storm. Inside the house, the mood was quiet. Relatives sat in corners. Candles burned. Soft prayers filled the room. Anna stepped into her father's bedroom. He lay there, pale but awake. His eyes opened when he heard the door, and when he saw her, his lips curled into the faintest smile. "Menina," he whispered. Anna rushed to him, fell to her knees beside the bed, and took his hand. It was warm, but weaker than she remembered. Tears blurred her vision, and her voice broke as she whispered, "I'm here, Papa. I came." He didn't speak again, but he looked at her, and in that look, he said everything. His eyes moved past her to the door, and then they widened slightly, as if surprised. Keanu had stepped inside, slowly, respectfully. Anna's father gave a tiny nod. Anna looked back. "This is my friend, Papa. He waited with me." Her father's lips parted, but no words came, just a quiet breath. And another soft smile. Keanu bowed his head. "Thank you for raising someone so strong." Anna's father blinked slowly. Once in an act, he closed his eyes. The room held still. No one moved. And in that stillness, time folded in on itself. He passed that night as the family gathered in mourning, as prayers filled the house. Keanu remained. He helped where he could. He didn't take space. He served food. He washed dishes. He lit candles. He stood beside Anna during the ceremony and held her hand when hers trembled. Later, in the early hours of the morning, Anna and Keanu sat on the rooftop. The city was quiet now. The stars above were dim but steady. Anna looked at him and said softly, "You didn't have to come." "Why did you?" Keanu looked out at the horizon, his eyes lost in thought. "Because once, a long time ago, I lost someone, and no one waited with me." Anna didn't ask more. She didn't need to. She leaned against him again, and for the first time in days, she closed her eyes and let herself sleep. Behind the flash one, they arrived back in Los Angeles. The sun was just beginning to rise. The airport was nearly empty, but that didn't stop the noise from finding them. Anna walked through the terminal with her hoodie pulled low. Keanu by her side, equally quiet. No words passed between them. Their bodies moved on instinct, heavy from grief, light from gratitude, caught somewhere between pain and peace. They had made it through the hardest part, or so they thought. It started subtly. A few people pointing phones in their direction, a flash from the corner. Then, outside the exit doors, a cluster of voices, not the soft greetings of fans, but the shouting questions of people paid to provoke Keanu. "Why did you leave the set, Anna? Are you two together? Did you run off for love or drama? What happened in Cuba?" Anna flinched as one flash hit her straight in the eyes. Keanu stepped in front of her without hesitation. "No comments," he said, his voice firm but calm. It didn't matter. The pictures had already been taken. The moment had already been sold. By the time they reached his car, Anna's hands were shaking, not from fear, from something worse, helplessness. Keanu opened the passenger door and gently helped her in. Then he circled around, got behind the wheel, and drove off without a word. The silence this time was not gentle. It was heavy, full of something sour. Anna finally spoke as they pulled into a quiet neighborhood, far from the city noise. "I forgot how fast the world can twist things." Keanu nodded slowly. "And how slow it is to understand the truth." They sat in the parked car for a while. She looked at him, searching his face for answers. "Do we tell them?" "They wouldn't believe it," he said softly. "They want a headline, not a story." But the storm had already begun. By that evening, gossip blogs were filled with images. The photo of Keanu waiting outside her trailer. The photo of them side by side at the airport. The blurry shot of Anna leaning on his shoulder on the plane, taken by someone 2 rows behind. All without context. All open to cruel imagination. On set the next morning, the energy had changed. The whispers were loud. The stares were longer. Some smiled with curiosity, others with judgment. One crew member, who had once brought Anna coffee with a friendly smile, now avoided her gaze entirely. Anna held her script tight, but her hands trembled. The director pulled Keanu aside. "Look, man, I respect you, I do, but this thing, it's distracting people. We're days behind, and the media's all over it. You know how this works." Keanu didn't flinch. "So what are you asking?" The director hesitated. "Maybe just give her some space for now. Cool things off." Keanu's jaw tightened. "She just buried her father." "I know," the director said, glancing around. "But we've got a movie to make." Keanu didn't respond. He just walked away, his silence louder than any argument. Anna stood at the far end of the lot watching him. She knew something had shifted, not between them, but around them. This wasn't about 2 people grieving anymore. It had become something else, an open stage for the world to judge, twist, and pull apart. But the cruelest twist came days later. A popular entertainment news outlet published a piece. The title was sharp and cold. Ana de Armas storms offset. Insiders blame emotional affair with KeanuReeves. Anna read it in her trailer. Her fingers trembled so badly she dropped her phone. She couldn't breathe. Everything in the article was a lie, but the photos, they made the lie feel real. She sat on the floor again, in the same spot where it had all started. Only this time, the knock on the door was louder. Keanu stepped inside, his face unreadable. He had seen it too. He sat beside her, cross-legged, like they were 2 kids hiding from the world. "You okay?" he asked gently. "No," she whispered. "It's like ... They erased what really happened. They turned my grief into gossip." "Then let's write it back," Keanu said, "with our actions, not with anger." Anna looked at him, tears in her eyes. "What does that even mean?" He smiled faintly. "It means we keep showing up with kindness, even when the world is cruel. And they did. Over the next few days, Ina returned to set with quiet dignity. She didn't explain herself. She didn't defend. She acted, she listened, she stayed soft. Keanu remained at her side not as a protector, not as a partner, but as someone who refused to let her stand alone. Then came the press junket. Anna almost didn't go, but Keanu convinced her. If we stay silent, they'll speak for us. If we speak with grace, maybe someone out there hears the truth. She sat beside him in front of dozens of reporters. Questions flew fast. Anna, what really happened in Cuba? Keanu, are you in love with your co-star? Is this all just a stunt for publicity? Anna took a breath. Her voice was steady. I left because my father was dying. Keanu came with me. Not for a show, not for attention, but because he cared. Because he knew I couldn't go through it alone. That's the truth. The room fell silent. Keanu added, sometimes, being human is more important than being famous. After the interview, something unexpected happened. A young assistant backstage approached Anna with a quiet smile. I lost my mom last year, she said, and no one cared. Watching you speak, it helped me. Thank you. Anna's eyes welled again, this time not from pain but from the smallest seed of healing. The betrayal inside the video had no narration, no music, no special effects, just raw, grainy footage filmed through a half-shut window from across the street. It showed Anna sitting by her father's bed, holding his hand. It showed Keanu lighting a candle in the corner of the room. It even showed the moment Anna broke down in Keanu's arms on the rooftop. Wrapped in silence and night. By the time Anna finished watching, her face was pale. She had felt exposed before on red carpets, in gossip headlines, in careless interviews, but this was different. This wasn't about stardom. This wasn't about scandal. This was a wound that someone had reached into, reopened, and brought to the world. She sat frozen, her back against the door of her trailer, as if trying to hold herself up. How did they get this? She whispered. But deep down she already knew the answer. The house in Havana had only been open to family. Only a few had known they were coming, and only one cousin had insisted on arranging their accommodations. Their car, their schedule. Her phone rang. Again her agent, her publicist, the studio. Her inbox was a storm of panic and statements. We need to get ahead of this. Do you want to release a joint message? Deny the intimacy. Make it professional. Maybe say it was for a documentary. Ina turned off her phone. She didn't want to spin this. She didn't want to explain it away. A soft knock came at the door. It's me, Keanu's voice said gently. She let him in, and he closed the door behind him like he was shielding her from the noise outside. You saw it? She asked. He nodded. Yes, they took something sacred. Keanu, they stole it. He didn't speak right away. He sat beside her on the floor, his back against the same wall. They can take footage, they can't take meaning. Anna turned to look at him. But they've already twisted the meaning. Then we untwist it. On our terms. Anna frowned. How? Keanu took a breath. And then, for the first time, since this all began, he told her something he hadn't told anyone in years. My sister once battled leukemia. I was filming The Matrix during her treatment. Every night I flew back and forth between scenes in her bedside. The media never knew. They thought I was being difficult, missing events, acting cold. But I didn't correct them. I didn't want her pain turned into content. Anna blinked. She had never heard him speak this way, with this much rawness. What happened to her? She asked softly. He looked ahead. She survived, but our relationship didn't. Too many years of pretending. We were fine. Too many silences. I swore if I ever had the chance again, I'd protect the truth, no matter what. Anna didn't say anything. She simply reached out and touched his hand. And in that moment, they made a decision. They wouldn't fight the media. They would face the public. But not with lawyers. Not with statements. With presence. The next morning, they appeared at a charity event for a local children's hospice, a place Ana's father had supported back in Cuba. They didn't arrive in a limo. They didn't wear designer outfits. They walked in quietly, side by side. No security. The crowd hushed when they saw them. A journalist stepped forward. Anna, do you want to address the leaked video? Anna nodded. Yes, that video shows me losing my father. It shows someone standing beside me when I couldn't stand alone. If that makes people uncomfortable, then maybe we need to ask why grief is treated like gossip. Keanu added, sometimes the most human things are the ones we're told to hide. Love, sorrow, stillness. We're not hiding anymore. And just like that, the narrative began to shift. People watched the video again not through the lens of scandal, but of tenderness. A well-known therapist reposted it with the caption, this isn't romance. This is presence. And presence is healing. A woman in Argentina tweeted, I buried my mother alone during the pandemic. If someone had waited with me like this, I might have survived the grief sooner. The comments changed, the tone softened, but behind the curtain, something darker stirred. Ana received an anonymous email 2 days later. Subject line, you should have left quietly. The message contained another clip in it. It showed Keanu in the backyard of her father's home, wiping tears from his face when he thought no one was watching. This wasn't just invasion, it was cruelty disguised as curiosity. Diana forwarded it to Keanu. It's personal now, she wrote. Keanu replied, then let's make it personal back, but in a different way. And so, they made a new plan. Anna contacted a documentary filmmaker. She trusted someone who had spent years capturing grief stories without glamour, without filters. Together, they decided to tell the real story, not of romance, not of gossip, but of what happens when one human soul simply chooses to stay for another. They started filming small. Ana in her childhood room in Havana, Keanu in his apartment, talking about stillness. They interviewed nurses, neighbors, strangers who had witnessed their journey. The project had no title, just one phrase they kept coming back to. He waited. It wasn't just about Keanu anymore. It was about the act of waiting itself, how rare it was, how radical, how it disrupted a world that moved too fast, judged too quickly, and forgot too easily. But as the film neared completion, their phones buzzed again. Someone had filed an injunction, a lawsuit accusing them of trespassing, defamation, and exploiting private moments for gain. Ana's heart dropped. Who would do this? The answer came faster than expected. Her cousin, the one who had offered to help, the one who had arranged everything. He was behind the leaked video. He had sold it to the tabloids, and now, fearing exposure, he was trying to stop the documentary before it revealed the truth. The courtroom didn't look like the movies. It was small, plain, the kind of room where truth didn't always feel dramatic, but heavy where words didn't echo but settled into the walls like dust. Anna sat at the long wooden table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Beside her, Keanu sat upright, calm, still. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, his face unreadable but respectful. Around them were people who had nothing to do with the story, just court clerks, lawyers, strangers called in by duty, but Anna couldn't ignore the eyes. Even here, some of them already carried the weight of headlines and gossip. Across the room sat her cousin. His eyes didn't meet hers. He looked away, adjusting his tie, whispering something to his lawyer. This was the man she had trusted, the one who had opened the gate to her father's house, who had smiled and nodded and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything." And yet behind her back he had sold the most sacred parts of her grief to the world. Anna felt her stomach twist. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The trial began not as a spectacle but as a cold list of accusations: unauthorized filming, invasion of privacy, defamation of character, public exploitation. The cousin's lawyer painted the documentary as a calculated emotional manipulation for fame. He accused Keanu of weaponizing empathy and Anna of leveraging loss for publicity. Every word felt like a slap. Anna listened quietly, her throat dry, her hands trembling beneath the table. When they showed stills from the video screenshots of her crying, of Keanu holding a candle, she looked away. But Keanu didn't. He watched them all. Not because he agreed, but because he refused to let their pain be distorted again without presence. Then came their turn. Ana's lawyer stood, a woman named Ruth, soft-spoken but sharp. She didn't attack. She didn't posture. She simply stood and said, "This case is not about fame. This case is about consent and the sacred nature of human vulnerability." Then she called Anna to the stand. The courtroom grew still. Anna took a breath and stood. Each step to the witness chair felt like a climb, but she didn't stumble. She sat down, took the oath, and began to speak. "When I left the set that day, I didn't leave to hide. I left because my father was dying. I locked myself in my trailer because I couldn't pretend anymore. And the only person who saw that pain and didn't run from it was Keanu." A murmur went through the room, but the judge silenced it. "He waited outside my trailer for hours, not to force me to talk, not to fix me, just to let me know I wasn't alone. When I flew home to Cuba, he came with me, not because he had to, because he knew what it meant to lose someone." She paused. Her eyes searched the room. "Not for sympathy, for understanding. We didn't plan a documentary. We didn't plan anything. The footage was stolen, edited, sold. The world turned our grief into entertainment. And instead of staying silent, we chose to speak, not in anger, but in truth." She looked directly at her cousin for the first time. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed my father's memory." Her cousin finally looked up, his face red with shame. Then Keanu was called to the stand. He moved like water, quiet, steady, purposeful. He sat, took the oath, and folded his hands on his lap. "I've worked in Hollywood for decades," he began, his voice calm. "I've seen what it does to people's stories. I've seen how kindness is mistaken for agenda, and I've learned, often the hard way, that presence is rare." He paused, then looked straight ahead. "I didn't follow Ana to Cuba because of headlines. I followed her because silence is unbearable when you're grieving, and because sometimes just being there for someone can be the most radical act of love." The room held its breath. "We never filmed anything. We never agreed to anything being recorded. The video you saw was taken without our knowledge, at a moment that belonged only to her and her father. And if we chose to tell our side afterward, it was only because the world had already taken the story and twisted it." He leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about privacy anymore. It's about dignity." And with that, he stepped down. The trial paused for a recess. Anna stepped outside the courthouse, the sun blinding her for a moment. Across the street, A small group of people held signs. Not tabloids, not protesters, just handwritten signs with quiet messages. Thank you for showing real grief. You helped me heal. I watched the video. Now I call my mother every day. Anna felt tears rise, but this time, they came with warmth. Inside. Her cousin's lawyer made one last attempt to turn the tide. He claimed emotional damage, claimed the documentary manipulated public perception, claimed his client had been painted as a villain. But when the judge asked him a simple question, did your client film the footage and sell it without consent, he hesitated, and that hesitation was all it took. The ruling came quietly. Anna won the case, but she didn't cheer. She didn't even smile. She just closed her eyes, whispered a silent thank you to the space around her, and squeezed Keanu's hand. They stepped outside into the fading light, and as they walked past reporters, microphones and flashing bulbs, Keanu stopped briefly. He turned to the crowd and said, "If you took anything from this story, let it be this: wait with someone, not because it makes a headline, but because it makes a difference." The final Framiona sat at her kitchen table long after midnight. The city outside had gone to sleep, but her mind had not. The flash drive lay on the table in front of her like a sleeping heart, silent, still, waiting to beat. Her fingers hovered above it. She didn't know who had sent it. Maybe someone from the editing team. Maybe someone who felt guilty. Or maybe it was something else entirely, but the note had haunted her for hours. You don't know the full story yet. Press play. She slid the drive into her laptop, her chest tightening as the screen blinked to life. A single file appeared. No label, just a timestamp. The morning her father passed. She clicked. The footage began. Shaky, raw, unedited. It was the moment Keanu had stepped out of the room to give Anna and her father privacy. The camera had stayed on, hidden, recording what it never should have. She saw herself seated beside her father, brushing back his thinning hair, whispering soft Spanish lullabies. The scene blurred her eyes with tears again, but then her father spoke, his voice faint but clear. "Ina, listen to me." Her image leaned closer on screen, silent. "I know the world will try to take parts of you. It always does. You are bright, too bright. They'll try to turn your pain into stories, your silence into secrets, your love into rumors." He coughed lightly. His breathing was shallow, but don't hide. "Nina, your light is not for hiding. It's for healing. And if one soul, just one, is less alone because of you, then my life was not wasted." Anna covered her mouth, the tears falling freely now. Her father had known somehow, even in his final hours, he had sensed it all. The media, the twisting, the pressure, and he had spoken not to warn her but to free her. On the video he paused, looked at the window, and then whispered, "And thank him too. The man who waits." Anna froze. Her father had seen Keanu, maybe not with his eyes, maybe with something deeper, and somehow he knew the value of what had been done without fanfare, without performance, presence, kindness. The screen turned black. The file ended. Anna sat there for a long time, the sound of her heartbeat loud in the silence, and then she stood up, took a breath, and picked up her phone. Keanu answered on the first ring. "I need to show you something," she said. An hour later he was at her door, hair a bit messy, eyes calm and alert. She showed him the footage. She didn't speak during it, didn't explain, she just let it play. When it ended, Keanu leaned back in the chair, his jaw tight, his eyes wet. He saw more in 5 minutes than most people do in a lifetime. Anna smiled faintly. He did. They sat side by side, the silence soft between them now. Not heavy, not awkward, just full. And that was when Anna made her decision. The documentary would still be released, but not through a major studio, not behind marketing teams or polished trailers. It would be uploaded quietly, no promotion, no pre-screenings, just a simple title. He waited, and beneath it, a single description: grief, presence, truth. This is not a love story. This is a story about how we hold each other through the unbearable. They posted it on a Sunday morning. No press release, no announcement, but within hours, the views grew. Not millions, not instantly, but consistently. And the comments told the real story. "I watched this with my daughter. We cried together. This changed how I see silence, how I see love. I've never seen something so quiet feel so loud." Therapists began recommending it to clients. Schools began showing it during empathy seminars, and slowly, without the force, the story they feared would break them began to mend others. Anna returned to set weeks later. The crew was different, quieter, more thoughtful. Someone had placed a small candle on her chair. No note, just a gesture. Keanu walked onto the lot beside her, and for the first time in weeks they laughed, not because the pain was gone, but because they had carried it through the fire and it had not burned them down. One afternoon, after a long day of filming, Anna sat beside Keanu under the shade of a large tree near the studio. "Do you think," she asked, "that all of this happened for a reason?" Keanu paused, looked out at the golden light between the branches. "Maybe not for a reason," he said, "but maybe ... it gave something meaning." She nodded slowly, and then, without thinking, she reached into her bag and pulled out the flash drive. She held it up to the light. "I think the world needs to hear his voice." Keanu looked at her. "Then let's make that the final frame." And so they did. A second version of the documentary was released weeks later. The final 5 minutes included her father's unaltered, unscripted dot. The world heard his voice dot, and for a long time, people remembered it. Final paragraph, closing the story with hope and full circle meaning. Years later, in a small theater in Havana, students gathered for a film festival. The lights dimmed, the screen came to life, and once again, the story of a woman's sorrow, a man's stillness, and a father's final words played quietly across the room. At the back of the theater, Anna sat alone, her eyes fixed on the screen. Keanu wasn't beside her this time. He was across the world filming. But she didn't feel alone. Because now, whenever someone felt lost, someone else would remember this story, and maybe, just maybe, they would choose to wait. Because sometimes, the simplest act, just staying, change a life forever.